Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Manifestations for this upcoming lunar cycle. I would love to introduce Sam Reynolds, who is a phenomenal astrologer who is going to be joining us every month to give us some insight on what to expect in the upcoming lunar cycle. And then we'll give you a little sneak preview of what to expect with your flower essences and your Magic Moon Manifestation Self-Care Kit. So I'm going to share a little words about Sam because he is not only a very dear friend. We were trying to figure out how long we've known each other. I think it's going on I want to say it's like 20 years. Sam has been one of the astrologers that I have turned to. He has given me insight that has shape-shifted my life and really given me a better perspective on what's happening in my life and why. But he brings a real practical realism to the astrological world. And I think that's so important, working with flower essences, working with the moon, working with all of these tools. It can get a little unwieldy. And I love working with practitioners that know how to take it all, distill it down, and help us understand, well, what does this mean for you right now in your life? Sam is the writer for tarot.com, astrology.com, horoscope.com, and he also can be found at unlockastrology.com if you want to schedule a consultation with him. New Manifestation subscribers get a 20% discount on a session with Sam, which is a great deal if you want more nuanced explanation of what's going on in your chart and in your life. So Sam, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just jump right into it. We talked about the upcoming lunar cycle, which starts on July 31st.
That's right.
Give us a little bit of insight about what's going on and what we should look out for.
So we're going to be going into a cycle that puts us between Leo and Aquarius. So we're going to start with the new moon on the 31st. And then when we get to August 15th, we're dealing with the Aquarius full moon. All the signs derive most of their meaning from the planets that rule them or are associated with them or are the hosts for them. Leo has as its planetary ruler the sun. So the sun is literally the raw power, the life force of the cosmos, or more specifically our solar system. So Leo, in terms of the demonstration of that power, is more about, like I would say, giving love or being on the stage. And an actor, for instance, since we're talking about stage, really when we say, oh, he is a good actor, we're talking about how they're able to express their emotions and feeling and how we're feeling with them, how they're giving to us. And in speaking about the audience, perceiving the stage, it's how we're impacted in receiving that, but also we're giving energy back. And the planet that's associated with Aquarius, with the idea of observing the stage, is Saturn. And Saturn is the most remote planet that once was in our solar system. Now, of course, it's like Pluto and beyond, but it's Saturn as once being seen as the most distant, the most remote. It was the watcher, the observer, the one in which we talk about the stillness and experiencing that level of distance. But the distance isn't so much just about being emotionally distant, but also having some measure of perspective and integrity to how we relate to the collective, the audience, but also in relation to from the collective toward giving focus toward even the one.
But as you were talking about the energetic of Leo and the energetic of Aquarius, it almost made me think about the difference between a yogic tradition and a tantric tradition. When we're talking about a yogic philosophy, we're talking about how do we become almost the watcher or the observer of the thoughts, the emotions, the body, being present as an outside looking in and saying, okay, I noticed this anger here or this pain here or this, and how do I kind of come above my body and be an observer with some distance? And then the tantric tradition, as I understand, is about really being embodied in the senses and coming down into the earth and experiencing and sharing in that way.
Yes.
So it's kind of like that interesting polarity again of like, how do I show up fully and embodied and enjoy the play and the deliciousness of life and uninhibited, unfiltered, versus how do I I don't want to say spiritual side, but how do I step into this watchful observer
Right. So it's that dynamic between being playful, and then being responsible for one's play, right? And then having the space for where you're holding or even creating the space to play.
That's a great segue to talk a little bit about the flower essence that we're going to be working with in this upcoming cycle, which I have here. You can see it. It's a flower essence called Intimate. And a lot of times when people see that flower essence, the first thing they think of is sex. And they think that it's a flower essence about, improving your sexuality. And while I think the essence has that indication, it's really about how do I engage fully in the play of life on earth, and how do I release my inhibitions, how do I allow myself to be bright and brilliant and fully immersed in my experiences, and how do I make space for play. A lot of the folks that I see in my private practice, there's this like dynamic of adulting, and it's like, okay, I've got to go to work, I've got to pay the bills, I got to pick up the kids, drop off the kids. I've got, it's like our lives can become very regimented. And then before you know it, months have passed and you're like, well, when's the last time that you had a deep, full bodied laugh? Or when was the last time that you did something that was purely for fun? And a lot of times we're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this upcoming cycle with the Intimate Flower Essences. How do I make space for play? How do I make space for fun? And how do I make space for a full immersion in my experience, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's lovemaking or washing dishes or, wherever we find ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's that distinction you're making in terms of talking about intimacy in relation to inhibition or the removal of inhibition is huge. Because if you think about it, when we get really formal or professional, we actually are talking about how we have a certain screen up or inhibition that we're using in order to kind of relate, whereas that drops when we're in more intimate circles, whether we're friends, lovers, or other people like that. So I think that's really spot on in terms of crafting intimacy. What I will say about the full moon, what it will throw in full relief, because it is like where you're visibly dealing with a distinction. Mm-hmm. I think it'll throw into full relief ways in which we might need to come back to balance, because there are some people who definitely need more of the play, and most of us in terms of adulting. But there's some other people who are always caught up in play, always at the club, always doing something that, is about having fun, but they're not thinking about the responsibilities or the circumscriptions or the inhibitions that they may need to have in order to grow, because that's also important too.
We're responsible for whatever changes that we make in our lives, but what the flower essences will bring up for us are where are those places of tension that need some reconciliation. So whether we're on the side of too much play, or whether we're on the side of not enough, or whether there's just inappropriateness around when we play and when we have responsibility, I think the flower essences help us to look at ourselves and ask those questions. Say, okay, well, where do I need some tweaking so that my life force can be congruent with my goals and my vision? And that's really where the power of this medicine comes in.
That dynamic going toward, individuality of Leo into integrity as the individual with the collective. I think that's right on point.
Anything else we should add or know about this upcoming cycle?
On the day that we do have this new moon, Mercury goes direct. I think it's instructive for them to start contemplating like what they learned during this last Mercury retrograde and what they can transform from that into the dimensions we've talked about: creativity, play, the expression of the self, where they may have felt inhibited. Because this Mercury was interesting because it started off in the fiery aspect of Leo and then retrograded into the watery aspect of Cancer. So Mercury now going forward will go back into Leo. So these lessons will come back again. And
I think it's really interesting that coming out of that phase of kind of self-reflection and stillness and maybe moving a little more in a more monitored way, that now it's like Leo and it's like, here I am in all of my glory. So it's going to be fun to play with that.
Really, Mercury retrograde is a call for a renewal and a new moon for Mercury. So people shouldn't freak out about a Mercury retrograde any more than they do about a new moon.
So just to give everyone a little sneak preview of some other things we'll be working with this cycle, I talked about the intimate flower essence. We're going to be looking at some really great poetry from the Radiant Sutras, which is really about embodiment and bringing ourselves into the juiciness of life. You'll have a guided meditation with some little special treats to help you engage all of the five senses and to really bring your sensual experience into whatever you do, wherever you are. And you can look out for our Tilling the Soil questions, which will help you begin to crack the surface of exploring this question of work, play, responsibility. When do I feel guilt around play? When do I allow myself pleasure? And how can I bring more joy into my life and in my everyday experience? So I hope you'll join us. You'll see you can subscribe. We have monthly options as well as more intense options that will hopefully meet your needs. So we can't wait to see you online. And Sam, thank you so much for your wisdom, your expertise, your friendship. This has been really, this is great. And I'm so glad to partner with you on this.
Thank you, Lindsay.